Thank you everyone for joining. I'm Dr. Nirupamaj from University at Buffalo, and we welcome you with everyone in the AEESP Student Services Committee. We welcome you to our first in-person AEESP career workshop for this year, and we are very happy to have our panelists here, Dr. Lilia Abron and Dr. Edeme Adelei. They are here in person, and then over Zoom, we have Dr. Eric Rosenfeld, Dr. Mohsen Bani, and Dr. Lauren Valentino. They are joining through Zoom, and they all are coming from different job sectors for this first session. So you can see this first session is going to be in Hillman 60 and 70. These two rooms side by side. So this is the combined session when where we learn about the different aspects of the different job sectors. And then in the next 2 hours, there will be parallel session. As you can see in Hillman 60, there will be a session on national laboratories, and then Hillman 70, there will be a session on industries from 10 to 10:50 in the next hour, where they will talk about individual job aspects of individual job sectors. Okay, and then from 11 to 11:50, there are 2 parallel sessions. State Federal Agency will happen in Hillman 70, and academia session will happen in Hillman 60. Okay, so I hope everyone understands the next round of sessions, and I will now hand it over to Dr. Jessica Wilson and Dr. Lauren Stedler for hosting from Hillman 60. Thank you. Yeah, I will stop the share so that we can see the speakers.
So thank you everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Dr. Wilson from Manhattan College, and this is Dr. Stadler from Rice. So how this first session is going to be structured is we're going to have the panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their educational background and how they ended up in the careers that they're with, and then we'll open it up to questions. Okay, so this session will run until 9:50, and then we're going to split you up into different groups depending on your area of interest. So I'm going to start with our panelists on Zoom. So if you could just introduce yourselves, where you're working, and just a little bit about your educational background. So let's start with Dr. Rosenfeld.
Dr. Wilson, nice to talk with you. I wish I could be there in person. I should be there in person, but my flight ended up getting canceled yesterday, and I look forward to making it there later today. So I'll be around to chat later today. As far as an introduction, my name is Eric Rosenfeld. I am an Associate Vice President and the National Drinking Water Practice Lead for Hazen and Sawyer. I have a couple other roles as well. I'm our Director of Innovations in Drinking Water, and I'm a Senior Technologist in our reuse group. I started with Hazen in 2010, and I came to Hazen from the University of Massachusetts, where I was an assistant professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And I went to UMass straight from my PhD studies at Duke. And then also I was served as a visiting professor at North Carolina State University as well.
Thank you, Eric. Let's hear from Lauren Valentino.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren. I am an environmental engineer in the Applied Materials Division at Argonne National Laboratory. At the lab, my research focuses on material and technology development for separation applications. I also currently lead what's called the Bioprocessing Separations Consortium, which is a multinational laboratory effort that's supported by the U.S. Department of Energy Bioenergy Technologies Office. Sorry, it's a mouthful. And this consortium aims to address technical challenges that are associated with the cost-effective production of biofuels and bioproducts. I started at Argonne in 2018 after completing my PhD in environmental engineering at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in 2017.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Dr. Mohsen Bebahani.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. My name is Mohsen Bebani. I'm actually a hazardous substance engineer and a project manager with California Department of Toxic Substances Control. Our department is part of Cali, PA. I've been with DTSC for a little over a year now, and before joining DTSC, I was working for a few years in consulting firms. And before that, I got my PhD from University of Toledo in Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll turn it over to our in-person panelists. So Dr. Abram.
Please speak into the mic. We can't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see it. Good morning. I'm Lilia Abram. I need to turn it on. Okay, finally. Okay, good morning. I'm Lilia Abram. I'm president of Peer Consultants, a 45-year-old environmental engineering consulting firm that I started 45 years ago. When I was going to school, you got 3 degrees. So I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry from Lamont College in Memphis, Tennessee, which is an HBCU. Got my master's degree here at Washington University in 1967 in sanitary engineering, because that's what it was when I was going to school. And we did not have PhDs in environmental engineering when I was in school. So I worked for a year with the City of Kansas City Water Department, a year with the Metropolitan Sanitary District of Chicago, so water, wastewater. Then went back to school and got my PhD in chemical engineering because environmental did not exist. And I was university professor for about 8 years, 9 years. And then I started the company because I wanted to get out and see my work and not just see it on paper. So that's my trajectory, and I'll talk more about that in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, Dr. Adelaide.
Thank you. So my name is Adeyemi Adeleye, and I'm an assistant professor at University of California, Irvine. This is my 4th year. Before moving to UCI, I used to be an NRC research associate with the US EPA. I don't know if you're familiar with that program. So it's a fellowship yearly thing you can do for up to 4 years. But thankfully, before the end of my 2nd year, I got the position at UCI. And before then, I was at UC Santa Barbara, where I got my master's and PhD. So I've enjoyed living in California. I had to move to Rhode Island, where the EPA research lab was. And when UCI came calling, I just couldn't say no because, you know, it's California. Yeah, nice to meet you all. Thank you.
All right, thank you to all of our panelists. Each of you has your own unique journey into how you got to the careers that you have today. And so our follow-up question is going to ask you to talk a little bit more about, I guess it's a twofold question. First is, what do you love most about your job? And how did you know that you wanted to pursue a job in the sector that you're in, whether that be academia, industry, national lab, government? Let's start with our in-person panelists. So Dr. Adelaide, will you kick us off?
Thank you, Dr. Sandler. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was in grad school. Well, I kind of knew before I started. I thought I wanted to be a professor. And by my 2nd year of PhD, I kind of got discouraged because I would receive emails from my advisor at weird hours of the day. And I'm like, it's not just him though. A lot of professors in my department. And I'm like, these people don't have a life. Like, they don't sleep. I don't want to do this. So I struggled back and forth. What else can I do? What else would I like to do? And when I was doing my candidacy exam, one of the questions I got was, hey, man, what do you want to do when you get your degree? And this was 1-2 years earlier. I told them, guys, I wanted to be a professor, but having worked with you all, I don't think I want to do this job. Well, frank, right? So one response I got, which I kind of took away, was, over time, as you get older, you don't need as much sleep. So it's okay for us to just wake up and send you emails. But more so, they also said, well, one person, not many of them, all of them. This person said, where you can decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. And I kind of took that away. The way I understood it was, if I wanted to work like they worked, I could. And if I don't want to do it that way, I also could. And 4 years in, I still don't believe in, because it's not been as easy as they made it sound. So why did I end up doing this? I hated it initially, like I said, and I was like, this is not for me. But over time, spending more time in research just showed me that this is what I want to do. So it's really the love of what the work entails, which is doing research, going to work, not knowing what you will find by the end of that day. And of course, the opportunity to interact with people and also share knowledge. And those have been the main things for me. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Dr. Abram?
You didn't turn it off, did you? I love getting up every morning solving problems of the human environment. And that is exactly, in my mind, what environmental engineers are supposed to do. It's all about people. Our work is all about people. We were trained that we have to be objective and we have to be transparent, not environmental engineers. Anything that we do impacts people, and we have to keep that in mind. And that's what I enjoy doing, and especially people who cannot do for themselves. How did I get here? Well, you heard earlier. I worked for state government in the water treatment plant. I worked for municipal government in wastewater treatment. I taught. I was university professor for about 8 years. I worked for GE. I worked for DuPont. So I experienced a lot of that. And then I went into business for myself for many reasons, but most of it had to do with the fact that I am a Black female at the bottom of the totem pole with as much education and training as anybody else. And there were many people who looked like me who were getting neglected, and it was not necessary because we have the training to solve these problems.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's go to our online panelists. Dr. Behabani, will you kick us off?
Sure. Again, thank you. With regard to my background, when I started grad school, that was always in my mind that maybe it's a good idea to become a professor. But when I moved forward, I felt like that in order to be a good professor, it's good to have actual work experience in the industry. So when I graduated, I found a job in a consulting firm, and I took it, and I moved to California, and then I started working for a small consulting firm, mostly doing stormwater management work. After almost a year, I found another position, this time with a bigger corporation, and I joined them. And actually, that was the start of my remediation career, because the project that I was assigned to was the biggest one, the biggest residential cleanup in Southern California. So, and this project was actually funded through the government and Department of Toxic Substances Control. So after starting the work there, being I mean, I had a lot of interaction with people, and especially in that project, we have been interacting with people of environmental justice communities. So that actually motivated me to, after a couple of years, motivated me to change the gear and try joining the department, because I love the role of department and I appreciated the work they have been doing to protect public health and environment. So I applied for the job, and last year I was offered a position with department and I got it. And now I'm really happy with my role, and I love the job that I'm doing now.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Valentino, tell us about what you love about your job.
Sure. So to be honest, when I was wrapping up my PhD, I didn't know exactly what direction I wanted to go. I had applied for and interviewed for faculty positions, for industry positions, and I had actually learned about potential careers in the national labs by doing a summer internship as an undergraduate student. And so as I was going through the process of applying and going to all of these interviews, I had applied for postdoc positions and interviewed at Argonne. And to me, the main reason that I decided to go with the position at the National Lab was because, in my opinion, it provides kind of a middle ground between academia and industry research. By working in the National Lab, we're able to collaborate with academic collaborators. We're able to collaborate with industry partners. We are heavily focused on research and doing good work that can make an impact. There are excellent facilities at the National Labs that enable us to do good work. And so all around, in many different aspects, aside from just the day-to-day work and the research and responsibilities, I find the National Labs to be kind of a middle ground between academia and industry. And in the end, that is how I ended up here.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Rosenfeld.
Thanks. So I'm going to answer the first question first, which is, what do I love about my job? And there's really three things. It's already been said, but the people, it's so important to have this sense of satisfaction that what we do impacts so many people, but also the way that this industry, especially, and I guess I'm speaking to the drinking water part, but I think it's more broad to environmental engineering. I think because we have a purpose that's motivated by things more than money, more than even interesting jobs, but really focused on impacting people's lives in a good way, there's a real great collaboration within, Hazen and Sawyer, but more broadly within the firm as well. And so, just getting to work with folks in my firm, with clients, but then also with industry leaders or even at other firms to solve these more interesting problems is absolutely what I love. I mentioned it as well. The other thing that I really like about my job is the interesting work. I'm fortunate to have landed in a position that's given me a lot of freedom to pursue innovation, pursue research and really jobs that I wanted to go after and do them the way that I've wanted to do them. And so that is getting to apply a lot of innovation. I've been given a pretty long leash at Hazen and Sawyer, and fortunately have been able to be successful with that. So, those are the things that I love, is just really the teamwork and the bigger purpose for what we're doing. And the question about how did I know, my path has been a little varied and a little windy to get here. And it was, and my whole story has built to this point. I neglected to mention this earlier, but I have a WashU connection as well. I did my Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering there at Washington University with a minor in environmental engineering. Had some excellent, outstanding professors impact me greatly in what I did. And then when I graduated, I started with an environmental engineering firm there in St. Charles, Missouri, just outside of the city. And the very first thing I did, fresh out chemical engineering, I had all this great theory in my head. I got to build the longest freestanding retaining wall in the Midwest. So I became a civil engineer at that. Unprepared, did more rock tickets than I ever knew I would do. But I decided with that, that practical experience that I was interested in getting engaged in things like drinking water. And so I started my PhD at Duke, had some very, very fortunate opportunities, including my advisor, Carl Linden, who was at Duke at the time, dangling a little carrot of getting to travel to Switzerland and work at Yevog for a few months if I were to stay for my PhD. So that made that decision pretty easy. While I was down there, again, working with people, I got engaged with Detlef Knappe at NC State. So when Carl went to do his sabbatical at CU Boulder, I was able to work in a completely different area, doing distribution system work instead of treatment plant work with Dr. Knappe, and got engaged in some of that. So that experience, that breadth of experience and the depth of experience with the PhD really prepared me extremely well. And I guess that's how I knew. That's at that point is how I knew where I wanted to be, and started down the path of assistant professor. Had a great time there, was engaged in an outstanding team up at the University of Massachusetts. I couldn't have asked for a better mentor crew than Dr. Tobias and Dr. Reckhow and Dr. Ostenthorf and Dr. Alfeld and all those guys up there. And then when I finally settled in there, I had one more opportunity up my sleeve, and Dr. Becker from Hazen and Sawyer called and told me, I know you're happy at UMass, which was true, but we have this unique opportunity. We want to start an applied research group at Hazen and Sawyer, which was a pretty outstanding thing to do, to start up an applied research group in 2008, when we were in the big midst of our worst recession in a very, very long time. But the board here saw the foresight to do that, saw the benefit of engaging a group and looking at the innovative areas of our industry. And so I leapt at that challenge and was excited to do so. And I've been rewarded with that decision ever since.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Okay, so now we're going to transition over to opening up the floor to questions and answers. So many of you are in the process of thinking about, what you want to do with your careers, whether you want to pursue an academic, industry, national lab, industry position. Some of you may have already started putting together your application packages. What questions do you have for our expert panelists here? We're going to walk around the room and have a mic. So just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And then folks in the other room, Manish, you can hear me, yes? Yeah.
Yes. So can we just alternate between the rooms? One question from there, one question from here?
That sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we'll start in this room.
And please, if you could just introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, my name is Tessa. I'm from Rice University. I had a very industry-specific question. What kind of avenues do you take to combat environmental racism?
Thank you. I'll take a stab at it. That's a very broad question. I think you're going to have to do it project by project, which is the way we work. I have learned over time that whatever the project is that you're working on, it's not going to be successful, and it's not going to happen until you hear the project beneficiaries say, my project, not their project or what my project. And once we hear my project, I can go back to the client and say, we can get started now. Now, how do you get there? It's called capacity building and education. And we forget that as part of project planning. Project planning is trying to figure out how much the project is going to cost and how you're going to put the organization together and the project team together and all of that. Project planning should start with, what is the project? How long has it been in the works? Who are the people being impacted locally and wider? And how much and what do they know about the project? Has this been going on to the point that it is beyond repair? Or is it something that we're just getting started? Like we're getting ready to get started in Washington, D.C. and a major project on finally getting the rest of the lead service lines out of the city. Now, this has been going on for about 5 or 6 years. You're not going to really pay much for it. And you would think that everybody would want it because it's all about health. They don't want you in their homes. And you have to go in the house to finish that connection. So this is going to take a tremendous, and there's been so much distrust with the water authority because they said, oh, we changed the process. Water's safe now. You can drink it. Really? So much distrust. It's going to take, I would say, almost a year to get the community ready to support that project. So it takes a lot. You have to have the people that you're doing the work for. They have to be on board, and you can't do it. They have to do it. You have to get it started, and you have to find who are the leaders, who has the juice that they listen to. That's who you work with, and you move out of the way and you let them do your job, and then you can do your job.
So it's about building trust.
Building trust and education. They need to understand what's going on. They need to understand how it's going to impact them. But you can't really do that. It's got to be neighbor to neighbor, person to person, friend to friend. And then you as the technical person can then come back in and get your job done. But every step of the way, they need to be there and you need to be there on a weekly basis, keeping that trust.
Yeah.
Do we have a question here? Hi there, my name is John St. Marie. Could you guys all briefly walk through your work-life balance and how comfortable you are with that balance?
Okay, we'll start here if that's okay. You want to start there? Okay. How about Dr. Rosenfeld? Will you start with that?
Sure. Well, so I have 4 kids here at home. I do travel a lot. I'm probably one of the only people that can honestly say, well, COVID was a mixed blessing. Being able to be sort of grounded for 2 years and be at home at a very critical time in my children's lives constantly was a blessing that came out of that tragedy of COVID-19 for me personally. I would say that work-life balance is there, but it is a constant challenge. I think part of being compelled to do an excellent job for the people that we serve is an urge to work until you make it right. To try to do that little bit of extra to gain that trust that we were just talking about, to try to do a little bit extra to save money for our clients. There's always that urge to do that work. So the balance can easily get out of whack It really can. There's a decent amount of travel when you're engaged nationally. I would say that I've been out of balance before, but that through purposeful thought and setting legitimate boundaries, I think right now I'm in balance. So I don't know. It's just, as you said, there's a lot of things that are looking to pull out of balance, but it can be done, but it's got to be a purposeful effort. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. How about Dr. Valentino?
Sure. In my opinion, when I think about work-life balance, I think that means balancing and prioritizing what's important to you. If your family life outside of work is where you want to put your priorities, by all means at the National Labs, you have the opportunity to do so, to stop your work at a certain time, to not work over the weekends. And on the other hand, if you are trying to go that extra mile, if you are really, focusing on a particular deadline or a particular, goal that you have in mind, it's also possible to put in that extra time to meet those goals. And so I think that Argonne supports people who want to coordinate their work and their home and also their community activities. And the lab will provide certain benefits that help you to achieve the balance that you're looking for. And that includes things like on-site childcare, flexible work schedules, especially in light of COVID. Depending on your type of work, there are flexible work schedules available for partly on-site and partly telecommuting work. And there are also, pretty generous vacation programs along with, social clubs within Argonne that promote diversity and, interaction among employees. So I think that it's definitely something that's possible, but it really is what you make of it. It's your choice and it's what you make of it. So I don't know if that answers the question. I think it's definitely possible to maintain the work-life balance. And, again, as I've kind of progressed in my career and started to take on more management responsibilities, that becomes more difficult. And so I definitely agree with Eric that it is a constant challenge, but it is something that is manageable. I can get out of hand, but it is manageable if you're willing to put in the time and effort to prioritize what's important to you.
Thank you. Dr. Behabani.
Well, as a person who had the experience of working for both consulting firms and the government, what I can say is, especially at the time that I was working for the consulting firm, because in the consulting world, it is mostly about how being more profitable for the company. So my role actually required me to do a lot of traveling, visiting sites, doing a lot of field works. I usually left home earlier in the morning, like 6 a.m. to avoid rush hours in the highway. And I've been in the field for the rest of the day. On occasions I had to go to the office to pick up some documents or for some meetings, and then come back to the field, and then left. In a normal day, lefting for getting back home around 4 or 5 p.m. and then obviously getting in the rush hour, unfortunately, at that time. And most of the time I had to be out of home for like 12 hours a day at least. But and then obviously that was not something I really liked, because when I get back home, I was mostly tired. But when I started my new role, and it was actually in the middle of pandemic, so we had the opportunity to work from home. Still I had to do some field works. I had to attend some meetings, but those were really occasional. So in that case, when I started my new role here, I felt like that I have a better work-life balance now compared to when I was working at the consulting firm. And it was understandable to me because of the difference between the nature of the work that you do for the consulting and the work that you do for the government.
Great. Okay. Yummy.
I think that was my response. Well, most of you work with professors, so you kind of have an answer to that question. And the only thing I have to add is, to an extent, you can. I really liked what Lauren said earlier, that you sort of define that work-life balance, because what it means to me is not exactly what it means to Dr. Stadler and your individual advisors. So personally, I don't think I have a great balance, but it's also the way I have defined it for myself in a way. And that could change over time. That could change based on the city you work at. You know, in Irvine, I bike to work and I'm at my office in 5 minutes. If I lived in Los Angeles, then I may be spending an hour in traffic to get to work. So a lot of factors play into it, but to a large extent, I feel professors don't have the ideal work-life balance, but a lot of us really enjoy what we do, and we do it because we want to do it, really. Yeah.
Dr. Irvin.
Thank you. I'm the senior member sitting here. I think my children are probably older than most of the other speakers because I have grandkids in college. So I started having children late. I did not have my first child until after I had earned my PhD. And I got divorced early. So I was able to maintain my life and the lives of my children as one. So our work-life balance was one and the same. I had 3 boys, and I didn't miss any Boy Scout meetings. I was den leader for everything. I sold more popcorn than anybody else. We went to church. We were in the bell choir. We did everything. And we had a TV in the trunk of the car and sleeping bags. And when they would come home from school, I did have a housekeeper get them fed. And they would go back to the office, sleep on the floor. So they grew up when I was in academia, and they grew up in the business. None of them are engineers. They weren't raised to be engineers. They were raised to be themselves, and they are all different. And that's my life. That's the lifestyle that I chose. And my children had absolutely no problems with it. If I were the ages of the young ladies here, they would be at this conference. They've been at all the conferences. One time I travel a lot in my job. I was in Japan sitting in the club room one day, and I had to cook dinner, tell them how to fix dinner, and I had to work an algebra problem. And by the time I got through, someone sitting next to me said, "May I come to dinner?" So, I mean, you have to that to me is my work-life balance. And that's the way I enjoy it. And you can ask my grandchildren. They travel with me. They've been to engineering conferences. Every time they come to visit, they want to go to the office because they want to see the ice cream and they want the tea and the cocoa and everything. So that's the way I live my life. But I think I have the opportunity to do that because I'm a me. I'm a single female head of household, so I can dictate the way I live. And my children, they just fall in line or they just stay at home. And that's the way I like it.
Thank you very much. I talk a little bit and I ask my question. When I joined the graduate school, I had a dream as an environmental engineer because I came from Iran, that in my country we face lots of environmental issues, from water, air, environmental, nature, wildlife, that you aspect from the
Guys, can
environment.
you switch the microphone there? It's very feedbacky.
Yep, we're on it.
Sorry. Is it open? Okay. Now, when I look at our major as an environmental engineering, I'm not satisfied with this way that we are all going, because if you look at the environmental issues as a global aspect, everything is getting worse. From water quality, air quality, environment, anything that you are seeing all around us is getting worse in everyday life that we are feeling. So we are talking about innovation here, national lab, everything. But I have a question. Are you satisfied at this way that you are going? Or is it enough? Because I don't like being in academy, because all we are thinking about that is getting grant and working on some, for example, specific things that is not also useful in today's life, everyday's life of all of us. So as an environmental engineering, do you think that is it sufficient to keep going this way or not? Thank you.
Is there a panelist who wants to kick us off?
I feel your pain, and but let me share another perspective. So like I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, there were things that weren't problems that we define as problems today just because we know more. So one practical example could be PFAS. Okay, PFAS wasn't a challenge. So you could drink water with PFAS 30 years ago and nobody thought you were being poisoned. But today, if you did the same thing, we would say you're being poisoned. And it's not because there is more PFAS necessarily, it's because we now know that PFAS are a problem. So perhaps we think things are getting worse because there's more knowledge. There is more technology, there is, more innovation. I mean, 100 years ago, people were dumping waste in the ocean, burying it in the land. But now we know more that we're going to get it back eventually. So that's not happening anymore. So I'm not saying you don't have a point, but I'm saying that knowledge is increasing so much that more things look like problems, but what's happening really is we're getting better in a way. At least from the environmental perspective, I feel like things are getting better, and that makes it look like we're in a worse situation. Just a perspective though, but your point is still valid.
I'd like to second that a little bit. I mean, I think the challenges are different today, and there are very, very many grand challenges that are going to require significant effort as an industry altogether to address adequately. But I do like the positive spin there, because I think that, as I've mentioned a few times, I think that the minds that are engaged in these challenges are incredible, and that the solutions that folks have come up with to this point have been, life-changing. I mean, you think about the chlorination of drinking water and how many lives that's saved throughout the world. Yeah, there's challenges that arise with that, right? Formation of disinfection byproducts and things like that. And so, in that context, there's always going to be trade-offs between the benefits and the costs. And, those costs aren't always monetary. But, as long as we're moving towards making things better, I think there's a positive story to be told in that, this is the group, this is the industry to achieve these great engineering feats that need to happen to solve some of the problems that we're facing today. And they're big problems like global climate change, and they're small problems like getting into building trust to allow people into your house to change out your lead pipes, right? Like those are huge challenges, but different, very different. And they need this broad group of people that understand the science, but also understand the people and the good that we're trying to do.
Add something quickly, just something quickly to that. Thanks, Eric. We all have our different places. Walt Disney said, I'll never forget this. If man can imagine it, he can do it, and she can do it. So we know that we have issues and we know we have environmental problems to solve. But we have academia, we have researchers, we have people like you and me who then implement and solve the problem. So we all have our different little pieces that we love, and together we can solve that problem. We are already on Mars. You know what we've done so far? We've collected rocks and we piled up the rocks, and we're building the robots now to go and collect the rocks and bring back. And you know what else is sitting on Mars? Bags of human feces. We cannot allow that. And we cannot allow to do to other planets what we have done to this one. 5 grand challenges of environmental engineering, a world without waste. And that's where we need to be working now. We can do it. It's in front of us. We know what we have to do. And this profession, we are so different and we are so smart. We know how to do this, and collectively, and we know we can't do it anymore. If man can imagine it, man can do it.
If I may add one more point.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, in order to add to the points that other speakers mentioned, I would like to say that environmental engineering is really dynamic. So whenever we see a problem, I mean, even some problems that already exist with the advance of knowledge and technology, once we know more about them, we have the opportunity to update our regulations, standards, guidances to address those challenges. For example, for any specific contaminant, we might have a standard, a screening level today, but that screening level would change over time. And if we feel like, and if we understand that that contaminant is more harmful, then we basically reduce the screening level. So that is the good thing, that we always have the opportunity to modify. Thank you.
Do we have time for a couple of comments?
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
Okay. I definitely understand the frustration of the person who had asked the question, but I think at the same time, as environmental engineers, we can't just sit back and do nothing. Everyone sitting in that room today, you have the skills, you have the knowledge. It's in your power to step up and do something to contribute to make a difference. And things are changing. We see it in the current administration. We see in what's being passed down to the national labs and in funding opportunities. There is momentum for change. And so at this point, we just need people to step up. And it's much more than making technical advances. As was pointed out by the other panelists, we need to incorporate the social aspects, the policy aspects. It's much more than just developing a good solution. It's a much broader problem, but I think that as environmental engineers, we have to step up to work towards finding those solutions.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for their input, for their insights. I know there are probably some other questions that you didn't have an opportunity to ask, but as we transition over to our next sessions, keep these questions in mind, because I'll have an opportunity to ask them in these breakout smaller sessions that are focused on each job track. So can we all give a warm thank you to our panelists? And we have a 10-minute break. And in this room is the National Lab.
Yeah.
And in Hillman 70 is industry panel.